Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Meg Isbitsky, and welcome to Wellness Wednesdays. Everybody who's watching via Zoom and via Facebook Live. So welcome. Today we are going to be talking about the 8 dimensions of wellness and all the good stuff that comes with it, talking about self-care and the importance of really understanding our health from a whole person perspective. So I'm Meg Isbitsky, and I'm the mental health administrator for Somerset County Department of Human Services. So I'm going to go ahead and get started and share my screen. Welcome to the 8 dimensions of wellness. So what we are going to talk about in our short time today is we're going to actually define wellness and what that means, because I've already used the term multiple times and you're going to hear it a lot more during this workshop. So I think it'll be good for us to all get the same sense of what it means and what we're really talking about. So we're going to learn about the 8 dimensions of wellness and kind of understand the influences on each other and within our daily lives. And then we're going to focus a little bit on self-care within each dimension. And so what that really means is, how do we know that we are nurturing each parts of these dimensions and what that can actually look like in our lives? So before we go into the 8 dimensions, I think we should define it by Peggy Swarbrick, who is actually the person that developed this entire concept. So let's go with her definition, which is wellness is a conscious, deliberate process that requires a person to become aware of and make choices for a more satisfying lifestyle. So all that really means is that somebody who is basically in connection with their own wellness is making decisions that are improving one's quality of life, one's independence, and their ability to make their own choices that are positive and in line with what they actually want. So we're going to be focusing on a whole health perspective. That's not something that we're really typically familiar with as a society. I think when we hear the word health, we really just think about our physical health. And if we're lucky, we'll think about our mental health as well. But we really define wellness as a sickness versus a health binary. You're either sick or you're not sick. It's very black and white, where we think you're either doing well or you're not doing well. And I think we need to kind of drop that binary thinking, because it's really more so of a spectrum. Our health and our wellness, it's really a journey, and it's fluid. It can change over time depending on where we're at in our lives, what we're going through, what we're experiencing. And so it's important that we acknowledge what this looks like, and that it's okay to have these changes going on and our ability to take them in stride. And I know we're really more familiar with the mind-body connection, which is definitely a positive, because we want to take into account the mental health and acknowledge how intertwined those two aspects are. I think if you've ever heard of the phrase worried sick, then you understand at least that there's a connection between our brains and our bodies. And with all of the signals and neurotransmitters that we're shooting off, we're constantly kind of just balancing those two pieces. But we're going to just take it a little bit further than that, than just the mind, body, soul. So there are really 8 dimensions of wellness, according to Dr. Peggy Swarbrick. So you'll see the physical and the emotional are on here, and those are the more obvious ones, what we're more familiar with. Even the spiritual component we take into account a lot. So that mind, body, soul. But we don't tend to look at all of the other aspects that make up our entire wellness journey and what that looks like. I think we have to be a little more cognizant of how they all intertwine and influence each other. So it's not so much a domino effect, but I really like to think of it as a spider web. And all of these aspects can affect one another and can positively and negatively change our ability to kind of go through life in accordance to our own goals and what we'd like to accomplish and how we'd like to live our lives. This is also referred to as a wellness wheel. So if you think about it from that perspective, basically all aspects of the wheel kind of have to be even and equal. Otherwise, it's not going to be a smooth ride. So that's some imagery I like to think about, just trying to show how interconnected everything really is. But before we go into all of the different dimensions, it's important to realize that in order to have that wheel where everything is turning and pretty equal and well managed in our lives, we're not able to go for, you know, the self-actualization and the intellectual aspects and those social supports and love and belonging without being able to first cover our basic needs. Because if we're worried about our finances or our job or paying our bills, we're not going to be concerned about mental health treatment or mindfulness and meditation, because we're just not there. We can't possibly tap into those aspects without first taking care of our basic physiological needs before we can build off that and really focus on things that improve our interests, our quality of life, and things that we actually want. So why is this important? That whole person approach that I discussed, that's going to be a theme throughout this whole presentation. So it's a very individualized context. We're kind of taking a score of our whole lives and really acknowledging what we are working with, more or less. So it helps us to create more realistic goals, because if we're aiming for something in a vacuum, we have kind of a worser chance of actually getting those goals accomplished, rather than looking at our whole dimension, all of our wellness aspects. So if we have a goal that doesn't coincide with another one of our dimensions, then, you know, we're not going to achieve it. Vice versa, if we have goals that really look at all aspects of our wellness, then we're going to have a better sense of realistically what steps we can take to make these goals happen and how we can make sure that we're achieving them. You know, if we have some physical health goals, say we want to run 10 miles a week, but our work schedule doesn't allow that, then we get home from work at 8 p.m. when it's dark out, then that goal isn't likely to happen considering other aspects of your health. So we're going to go into every dimension, but we're going to start with physical, because that is the one that comes to mind most likely. That is what we associate with wellness. And it's the easiest, I think, to recognize what it should look like in our lives. Whether we're hitting all of these points is an entirely different story, but at least we're able to be aware. So these definitions also come from Peggy Swarbrick's whole 8 dimensions concept. So we're just going to roll with that to keep consistent. So physical is recognizing the need for activity, diet, sleep, and nutrition. So what does that look like in our lives? And again, we all know what it should look like. You know, whether we're staying away from pizza and sitting on the couch is a different story. But we know it makes up our healthy diet, our sleep, avoiding putting tobacco, alcohol, and drugs into our body, and just keeping up with our care, maintaining and prevention, catching up on things that could become more serious and severe, and making sure that we are catching that as early as possible. And then just maintaining a reasonable weight, you know, making sure our hearts are working healthy, very straightforward. And then emotional. This is hopefully the second one that's in your mind, and you're understanding that these two things can really coincide with one another. So it's that ability to cope effectively with life and be able to create satisfying relationships. So being able to understand and express your thoughts and feelings. That seems very easy, but it's not always. And making sure that our emotions are relative to a situation. Are we able to regulate how we think and feel? And are we reacting in a way that is actually appropriate to what is occurring? Like if, say, there's something happens at work, your coworker embarrasses you, are you able to kind of check those emotions, whatever they are? If it's shame or anger or frustration, are we able to channel that into a reasonable response and kind of check in with your coworker later? Or are we slamming the door and going off on them? Because even though your feelings are very valid and no one can tell you what you are supposed to feel in a situation, but are you able to react in a way that is just really reasonable and is expected? And do you have these positive feelings of self-esteem, ability, and worth? that really can underline a lot of our actions. And I think our level of confidence or what we can achieve is actually something that can either be a major strength or something that gets in our way without us even realizing it. So that's even the ability to put yourself in a situation that's a little bit out of your comfort zone, or trying something new and building some perspective. This is something that's really integral to making sure that we are able to be connected and understand kind of what we're experiencing and what we are interpreting from interactions and the world around us in general. And being able to have these coping skills that do promote resiliency, because we're not always going to be in a positive situation or something that we are, enjoying or feeling like we're in control of. So being able to have these skills that allow us to kind of reframe and shift is really important. And in addition, stress management techniques for tension, anxiety, being able to actually cope with whatever situation is in front of you reasonably, and kind of make it out to the other side. And I know that those are kind of phrases that we say a lot, but what are these coping skills? A lot of them we're already discussing. It's these ability to have positive communication, boundaries, to have that perspective and be able to see from other people's points of view, as well as just the ability to make decisions, be solution-based, and really just use humor and other skills to appropriately understand and react to a situation. And our environmental wellness. Just hearing that just probably elicits ideas of nature and habitats and what that looks like in terms of Earth Day. And that's not entirely it, but it's not far off, because it's our environment that we are currently in. It's whatever setting or location that we do spend a lot of time in. So that's our home environment, our work environment, if that's an office or a living room or a grocery store or any educational setting. It's where we spend a lot of our waking hours, and it contributes a lot to our underlying wellness and our feelings and abilities. So that's having safe and affordable housing. That's almost such something that we think is such a basic need and such a given that we don't even think about that sometimes. And safe and affordable housing really just means you're in a situation where you are safe from crime, your housing is habitable, and it's not putting you out to be able to afford it every month. And it's also just having a positive work or school setting. Again, this is one of these elements that affects other dimensions as well. So making sure that it is a pleasant association and it helps you with your occupational and your financial wellness, which we'll go into a little bit later. But just the fact that this one is so interconnected because it's something that we come into contact with on a daily basis. And if our living or working situation is a space that's suitable for our needs. Is it meeting our needs? Are the conditions reasonable? Are we in a situation that we feel safe and we feel like, we're either being treated respectfully or it's worth all of our rent money or whatever the situation is. And then having also these positive social relationships associated with these settings. So whether that's your neighbors or your family or your roommates, or it's any coworkers or clients or customers that you come into contact with, are these relationships and experiences at least, neutral to positive rather than on the negative side? Are we more likely to be in situations that aren't kind of taking away from that environmental wellness? And then also the ability to make necessary changes to improve one's setting. This is something that if this isn't happening in your life, you can very blatantly recognize it. If you're in a situation and you're not able to make these choices or any changes that are actually going to improve your working conditions or your living conditions, that's really obvious when this is a deficit. But if you don't notice it, then that means you probably do have this quality, that you are able to ask your boss for something different or make a change to your home that's going to be safer or improve your quality of life. And our intellectual wellness. So that's recognizing our creative abilities and finding ways to tap into new knowledge and new skills. So I think the thought here is probably documentaries and books and things that are very scholarly in nature. And that's the only way that we are tapping into this intellectual wellness, but that's not true. It's also practicing creative and stimulating mental activities or games. So whether that's taking on a hobby or just kind of trying something new, putting yourself in a situation, again, kind of taking yourself maybe out of your routine or out of your comfort zone and kind of just challenging those perspectives and being open-minded enough to try something that you might enjoy or at least giving it a chance. Because that's a huge component of this, is the ability to use these critical thinking skills and practice that. It's making an effort to learn new things and see new perspectives. And it's the ability to see more than one side of an issue. And that's especially so for things that are controversial in nature. And I'm going to take a guess of where we are in 2021, that within the past year and a half, we've all flexed this muscle at least a little bit in terms of how we feel about trying to understand somebody else's point of view in terms of even COVID restrictions, politics, and social issues. I think we've all hopefully tried to at least understand, a different side of an issue and been able to try to have a conversation, not to convince somebody else of something, but just to try to build that perspective. Not really to change your mind, but just to fully have an idea of what the other side is. It's just that open-mindedness and that ability to use your perspectives and look at somebody else's side. And it's also engaging in cultural, educational, and community activities. What is going on in your community that you can support, and just the ability to try to learn a bit more and expose yourself to something that you wouldn't normally come into contact with. And it's also being able to admit not knowing something. I think the intellectual wellness, that can come off a little bit like our imposter syndrome. So just thinking that, we have to pretend that we are already experts in these things, or else people are going to see us as a deficit. And I think that's something that is present in society, but I wish we challenge that more. And just being able to admit, to ask questions, to even admit failure, I think is really imperative for flexing this muscle and trying to put yourself in a new perspective, or just contribute to that growth, because that's something that you don't get from doing the same thing all the time. So being able to, be okay with failure, and then also learn and, maybe even be impressed with yourself by something that you pick up, or now you're able to see in a different perspective. And financial. This is another one that I don't think comes naturally to us when we think of wellness, but I think it's really important, because going back even to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if we're not in a good situation financially, we can't really build off that. We can't be exploring new hobbies and kind of tapping into this creative and curious side of ourselves if we're still not able to even kind of think straight enough about, are we able to pay the rent? Can I, afford a medical bill? So this one is really imperative to having the wealth and, the wellness kind of build off of itself. So I think we all have an idea of what financial wellness looks like, whether we're there or not. This one to me is very similar to physical health in, the respect that we can see whether we have it or not. I think it can feel very apparent to ourselves, at least. Maybe not from the outside looking in, but, we're all in tune more or less with our financial situation, whether we're happy about it or not. We're aware of what we know and what we don't know, and kind of some of the actions that we do take. So having financial literacy, that's understanding our personal financial status and our own situation, and also the ability to budget and make sure that we are, paying our expenses and our bills on time every month, that we are aware of our financial obligations in terms of managing debt, or whatever we have kind of contributed our money to or pledged our money to, and being able to make sure that we're keeping all of that straight, and we're aware of the maintenance, buying a brand new car, everything that kind of comes into that. And having a safety net to deal with emergencies. This may seem like something that you read in every financial article, that this is a necessity, but I think the majority of Americans don't necessarily have this, or not built up to realistically where it needs to be. I think 63% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So there almost isn't that ability with a lot of families to actually put more money away to the side. So this can almost even be seen by as a luxury, kind of depending on where you're sitting, because, again, being able to save for an emergency is one thing, but also being able to have financial goals is kind of a different situation. So, if you don't have that financial literacy or the budgeting, or even just the means, building on these financial goals, they're something that can be seen as a luxury, but they're something else entirely. So this is, if you are able to have these goals and meet them and achieve them, then that is really contributing to your financial wellness, that you can make decisions, that you're not kind of torn between paying one thing or the other, but you're able to have that wealth and make some of these decisions in a way that isn't so dire. And then lastly, knowing where to turn, where to get help, where to get information on finances. Do you know what resources are available? Do you have family members who can kind of walk you through some of these processes? Do you know kind of what decisions that you are making around debt or student loans, or whatever you're kind of signing yourself up for? Do you have that literacy, or do you at least have the connection to achieving more information and more options, and understanding kind of what you can do next? And occupational, I really think this one goes kind of hand in hand with your finances, because although Peggy's definition is that personal satisfaction derived from somebody's work, I think that's kind of a little bit higher on the scale of self-actualization. I think, obviously, being happy with a career or an educational choice is really, I think, should be one of our goals. We spend a lot of time pursuing our education and our career through various certificates, through trainings. We should be happy. You would hope that that's the goal, is to be happy with wherever you end up, because again, it is something that you spend a lot of your waking hours at, and it should really be taking advantage of your skill set and your scope. So that's obviously the top of the tier of this goal and what occupational wellness looks like. And if these jobs are consistent with, your values and your beliefs, if you love what you do, and if you feel that it matters for whatever reason, based on whatever that goal is or that value, that really contributes to our wellness and how we feel about going to work every day, or going to school, or whatever choices that we do make surrounding this topic. And also the ability to balance between our work and our leisure time. Are we in a situation where we do have that ability, or are we working two jobs and, trying to balance out childcare and education, and kind of not having that balance where we would like it? And again, are we working within safe and stable conditions? Safe in terms of, are the conditions, are they reasonable? Are they healthy and appropriate? but also stable in terms of, is our work secure? Are the finances secure? Especially, I think this is a fear in COVID more than ever is, is this something that we can go to work every day and know that you are going to get a paycheck or more hours or still hold a position? I think, unfortunately, that is a real fear right now. And lastly, being compensated reasonably for that skill and for that scope of work. A lot of times this can be something that is a challenge as well, because if we're in a situation where you can only get whatever job you can get, or you lack transportation, or some of the situations surrounding the decisions that you can make are different, then that really can affect some of these other aspects of where you live, where you work, and kind of what that looks like in your time and your schedule and your daily life. And spiritual, I think this is another one that we don't tend to think of when we think of our wellness, we do tend to think of when we think of our wellness, because it can be pretty interwoven into our emotional health. And so really what that looks like is it's just a connection to our personal beliefs and our traditions. So whether that's an organized religion, or it is our connection to our belief system and whatever traditions or rituals that we participate in, but it's being able to connect to these beliefs as a support, and just understanding where, how this helps you understand the world around you and where you kind of fit in with all of that. And being able to connect to a network of like-minded people, if you so choose, if that's what your spiritual wellness looks like, if it is, being connected to other people that believe the same thing or find the same happiness in that, then I think that's really important as well to this, if you want. If not, that's not a necessity, but that is a piece of this. And being able to connect to our spiritual wellness when we're searching for a purpose or a meaning in life. This is something a little bit bigger than ourselves. So whether that's existential, or it's just the connection to nature and humanity and our values, this is something that we turn to in times of worry or stress. And so this is our ability to have some purpose and some meaning, to kind of get us through some of these times where it doesn't feel so good, and to take us out of some of the day-to-day stressors that we do experience that really feel like they aren't as important. And this helps us kind of give a deeper meaning to what we're living. And the ability to practice gratitude and appreciation. This is something that a lot of bodies and of belief systems that they really promote, is this ability to be appreciative for what you have, and to be able to contribute, to push that back into your community or into your family, and being able to kind of do for others or have them do for you. So again, into that interconnectedness with your network and whatever that can look like for you. And lastly, social. I saved this for last so we could end on kind of a positive note, because this is one of the ones that's a little bit more fun. It adds deeply to our purpose and our health and wellness, but this one is one that I think hopefully can all celebrate to some extent. So it's really just having a support system made up of friends and family. So having relationships with people who are trustworthy and who are consistent, that you're able to turn to them if you need support, and vice versa, that these identified individuals who can come to you, or whatever this group looks like in your life. And it can be kind of made up about like social friends and family, maybe even work friends, or somebody that you find through a hobby or a mentor. But it's just having that support system that can be there emotionally or offer kind of advice or counsel. And our social wellness also looks like our ability to just have strong boundaries and healthy communication skills, period. So this isn't just with your closest friends or family members. This is the ability to kind of go through any social interaction. So basically any interaction with another person or group, and being able to navigate it in a way that's healthy and that is advocating for your own needs and for what you specifically are kind of trying to get out of that interaction or that situation. And also being true to yourself with your boundaries and respecting your specific wants and needs. And then just kind of a greater sense of community and connection, living in a community that you believe in, that you think is safe, that you care about and you think cares about you as well. And being able to contribute, to connect back to that community. So whether that is a local cause or just finding your niche in terms of a hobby or a positive situation, that's kind of just an overall under that social umbrella. So in terms of our dimensions of self-care, how do we know where we are thriving? How do we know that some of those things I just described are really present in our lives? And how do we know also where we're lacking? Because that adds directly to where we can improve. And I think there's several different ways to do this. And our time is coming to a close, so I won't spend a lot of time walking us through an entire self-evaluation. But if you think about some of those aspects that we talked about in the different dimensions and how they can really affect each other, I think it's important to look at kind of our wellness wheel. If we're going to go back to that imagery of making sure that we are able to roll smoothly and our wheel is pretty consistent, it's important for us to go through every aspect and kind of evaluate and challenge where we're at. And if we are happy, if we're getting our needs met, and if we're satisfying any specific goal, that's one thing. We keep up what we're doing and maintain that dimension. Because these are things that we have to consistently be doing. They're not check marks. This is a constant thing that we have to check back in with to ensure that we are, tapping into that health and that wellness. Versus if we look at an aspect of our lives and we know that we're in need of improvement, then we can kind of sit and think of some different ways to kind of better ourselves in that capacity. So just taking our intellectual health, for example, are we able to develop some goals that would hopefully make us a little bit more open-minded and to tap into some new perspectives or information? Is there something that we want to learn more about or something that we've always wanted to try? Are we able to reach those goals and kind of satisfy that aspect? Versus say our spiritual, are we kind of struggling a little bit right now because of, whatever we're going through collectively with Corona or just personally, are we able to tap into those skills that make us feel like we are, still having this positive purpose in life and meaning? And, this is something I'm actually going to put a link in the chat of a place where you can go and take a self-evaluation, because it takes a little bit of time to really think about where you're at in your life and kind of where you want to go and how to make sure that all of these aspects kind of stay relative to each other and that we are tapping into all of these needs. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I don't know if there are any questions, but I want to thank everybody so much for your time today with me during your lunch. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat. But in the meantime, I'm going to put the self-evaluation and some different resources in our chat as well, because I know we identify kind of a lot of different needs. So if you do want to learn more about different resources in the county or some mental health services, you can click on the first link. And the second link will kind of guide you to our Somerset County Hope and Healing Program, which is something that has come since coronavirus as a response for emotional support. And you can tap in and learn more about whatever groups and events that are coming up. And then finally in the chat, I'm going to put a link to a wellness self-evaluation that you can take. And if there are no questions, then I want to thank everybody for your time today with me during your lunch. And I hope everybody has a great day.